Hello, my name is Victoria Orchard, and in coordination with the University of St. Thomas's Geography and Environmental Studies program, I was able to create this analysis of conservation mismatch in the United States. Conservation mismatch is a general misalignment of biodiversity hotspots and species priorities with those lands that are protected. For conservationists, this is alarming. Most of the United States protected land is established as so because of beauty and historical meaning. While these places are part of a foundation of our country, it is time we utilize the data and knowledge we have to conserve biodiversity where it matters most. U.S. Protected Lands Mismatch Biodiversity Priorities is an article written by Clinton Jenkins describing the coined term conservation mismatch. In this, he describes how the protected lands we have in the western U.S. do not align with priorities determined by his index. Combining important biodiversity aspects such as small range, endemics, and habitat outside of protected lands, Jenkins created this priority index of the U.S. depicting which lands would be most beneficial to conserve. Although logical, some, such as Christopher Brown, critique Jenkins' findings, arguing that scoring systems such as the priority index have been shown to identify biologically ineffective and economically insufficient priorities. Brown contends that the system should prioritize actions, not species or places. While both arguments justify the need for conservation, Jenkins disagrees with Brown's assessment that monetary value takes priority and responds by saying that the focus should not be on the most species for the buck, but rather the species themselves. Brown's response to conservation differs from Jenkins in three major aspects: cost and convenience of acquiring land, prioritizing action over species in place, and local social enabling factors. While all these factors are necessary for understanding conservation, it is important to analyze these arguments by geospatially mapping the evidence. In order to analyze both arguments, I developed three research questions. How do current protected lands align with Jenkins' priority index? How do protected lands align with biodiversity hotspots? And based on those questions, where should funds and effort for conservation be allocated? First, it is important to identify lands in the U.S. that are already under protection. Using the Protected Public Lands data layer, I was able to create this map that depicts neighborhood protection or the general protection of a specific region. As you can see, most of the protected land in the U.S. is in the west and some coastal areas. If we look at Jenkins' priority index, where the red depicts the highest priorities and the green the lowest priorities, we can see that most protected lands are in the southeastern U.S. and the coastal areas. By then laying the protected points over Jenkins' species priority map, it is very easy to see visually what is meant by conservation mismatch. Nearly all of the protected points are centered outside what is identified as the most important to protect in order to conserve biodiversity, justifying Jenkins' argument. I then wanted to look more simply at biodiversity hotspots in the U.S. and the relationship between protected lands. By combining layers for amphibians, birds, mammals, and trees, I isolated species hotspots. Laying these protected points over the map once again showed a misalignment of priorities and protected lands. These species hotspots generally mimicked the priority index determined by Jenkins. In conclusion, I found three things to be true. First, the protected land in the United States does not represent the same land as Jenkins' priority index. Second, they also do not represent the biodiversity hotspots in the United States. And finally, in agreement with the Clinton Jenkins article, conservation for biodiversity should be prioritizing the land that exhibits the most crucial need in terms of hotspots and priority index rather than monetary value and political will. I argue that Jenkins' priority index is worthy of such title because of the correlation provided in the biodiversity map. Finally, I want to recognize the data sources used in this presentation and the documents that provided the foundation of this research.